From drop shots that catch everyone by surprise, to the way he's already being compared to the greats. Here's why tennis players are afraid of Carlos Alcaraz. For starters, a lot of it has to do with the way he uses the drop shot. It's a useful weapon to have, particularly when you know how and when to use it. Most players on the Pro Tour use the drop shot as a way of getting out of jail, but with Alcaraz, it's different. He uses the drop shot as a primary threat, and it annoys just about every player on the tour. You never know when he's gonna bring it out and catch you off guard. And that's not even the best part. Anyone can master the lob, but it's the deception that wins you a point, not the drop shot itself. Thanks to his aggressive playing style and ability to easily apply pressure, Alcaraz is the master of hiding the shot until the very last second. The more I watch players desperately chasing the ball and failing to get there in time, the more I'm convinced they'd much rather have their hearts broken by Novak Djokovic. No one wants to be in a ridiculously long rally with Carlos. He's got the cardio and stamina to last for days, doesn't break a sweat while he's wearing you out, and just when you think you've got him cornered, he pulls out that near-perfect lob. So why even bother chasing, right? If you need any proof to show you how perfect Carlos's lob game is, just look at the stats. Carlitos averages 3 drop shots per match and has a 68% win rate when he uses it. To think that Alcaraz arrived on the ATP Tour in 2020 and has already made the drop shot his signature move is really impressive. I mean, I can remember the Fed Express humiliating opponents with his lob shot and leaving players feeling like this. But Alcaraz is doing it so well that the next generation will remember it as the shot he popularized. One thing I'll never forget is the time he destroyed Stefanos Tsitsipas at the 2023 French Open. Steph was considered one of the top 3 favorites to win the title, and there's no question he's a brilliant clay courter. But the way Alcaraz toyed with him was totally outrageous. Those back-to-back drop shots early in the first set crushed the Greek superstar, and it was obvious that the wind got knocked out of his sails. From that point on, Steph was only going through the motions, and the commentator captured the moment perfectly, saying that he was getting manhandled by Alcaraz. By the time it was all over, you knew Steph was questioning his career as a tennis player. That's one of the reasons why players are terrified of Carlitos, because he's as dominant as they come. Whether it's the playing style he uses to pepper his opponent's ground strokes, or the way he steamrolls through every competition taking no prisoners, he's an intimidating guy on the court. In the opening rounds at the Indian Wells Masters, someone was obviously trying to set him up to fail, and he was up against Thanasi Kokkinakis and Talon Griekspoor. But guess what? He killed it. Playing the only way he knows how to play, Alcaraz came through without dropping a set. In the quarterfinals, he had to take on the impressive Felix Auger-Aliassime, and he made him look like a rank amateur player. 6-4, 6-4. See you later, and thanks for coming out. Despite some wonderful displays up until the semifinals, Alcaraz's job didn't get any easier. He was pitted against the Italian sensation, his biggest rival, Jannik Sinner, with a place in the final and bragging rights on the line. Everyone knew Sinner wasn't going to make it easy, and he didn't, forcing a tiebreak in the first set. The level of tennis on display was stunning to watch. Fans couldn't get enough, and Alcaraz simply clicked into high gear, swatting Sinner away to win the match in straight sets. That dominance continued in the final in what was the youngster's most impressive performance of 2023. Carlos defeated the self-proclaimed hardcourt expert, Daniil Medvedev, dropping only 5 games, en route to yet another Masters 1000 title. But as good as Alcaraz is, the real reason he's earning the respect of players far more experienced than him is that he's already a Grand Slam champ. The OG Next Gen has been around for a long time. They've done everything right, but for some reason they can't replicate their purple patches in the majors, and that's where Alcaraz comes in. He won his first Grand Slam in 2022. The same year, he was seeded for the first time on the ATP Tour. Do you know how crazy that is? At the 2022 Australian Open, he was one of 32 seeds, and at the end of the 2022 US Open, he was a Grand Slam champion. Compare that to what the likes of Alexander Zverev, Tsitsipas, and others are doing, and you'll understand why Carlos is hyped so much. He's earned it, he's worked hard for it, and most important of all, he's here to stay. If it wasn't frustrating enough for the next gen to run into the Big Three's longevity, they also have to put up with the 20-something Spaniard who has an entire career ahead of him and enough motivation to dominate the tour for decades. That wasn't the only takeaway from Carlitos' first major win though, because when he went all the way in at Flushing Meadows, the tour was reminded of how he doesn't break under pressure. It is pro tennis that we're talking about here. You've got good days and bad days. And earlier I went through what Carlos is like on his good days. But now I want to tell you what he's like on his bad ones, because the US Open 2022 gave us a taste of both the good and the bad. In the first week of the tournament, Alcaraz didn't drop a single set. It was pure dominance. But heading into week 2, things got very interesting. Marin Cilic made life incredibly hard for Carlos, pushing him all the way to a decider. Fortunately, he found his footing despite being under so much pressure, and he closed out the 5th to take on Sinner in the quarterfinals. Sinner and Alcaraz have given us some great matches in their young careers, but the best of them all was this one, hands down. The Italian held on to his nerves in 2 consecutive tiebreaks to take a 2-1 lead after the 3rd set, and for many observers, that was curtains for Carlos. But the way he responded to being a set down is what scares everyone on the tour. And I mean it, he was down and out, man. There was no way back. Sinner didn't make any mistakes in the 4th either. He played perfectly, but as usual, Alcaraz just wouldn't take no for an answer and refused to give up. A nerve-wracking ending to the 4th allowed Carlos to force a 5th, and he crushed Sinner's serve and spirit to advance to the semifinals. You'd think he deserves a bit of breathing space in the Final Four, right? Wrong. Frances Tiafoe, the crowd favorite in New York, was fresh off the biggest win of his career, defeating Rafael Nadal in the quarters, and he had no plans of bending over for Carlitos. Even when it looked like Alcaraz had the upper hand, like the dominant 3rd set, which he won 6-1, Tiafoe was inspired by his hometown support. He fought back and ensured the match went the distance. Alcaraz had to endure a 3rd consecutive 5-set match, and he ultimately defeated Tiafoe to book a place in the US Open final. The final itself was a snooze fest, cause Casper Ruud was no match for the level that Carlitos brought to New York, and he folded in 4 sets. Alcaraz became a Grand Slam champion for the first time in his life, the youngest world #1 in history, and his achievements have earned him comparisons to tennis goats. If you take Andy Roddick's word for it, Alcaraz is a much more complete player at his age than the big 3. That's some take, I tell ya. Andy's not the only one making bold claims, though. Tanasi also thinks Carlos is capable of eclipsing the likes of Djokovic, Federer, and Nadal. Simone, Sinner's coach, joined the Carlitos hype train too, calling him a phenomenon, something the tennis world has never seen before. Carlos likes to play it down though, and he's way too modest to accept compliments like that. But you can bet your bottom dollar that he'll be in those discussions when all is said and done, because it's just the way he's wired. The supporting cast around him keeps him on his toes, and it's no surprise that players don't want to face him. So, from the way he's already being compared to the greats, to drop shots that catch everyone by surprise. That's why tennis players are afraid of Carlos Alcaraz.